Well, I can tell you and speak from experience that I have had so many conversations with people throughout the years that have dealt with relationships that have been similar to mine, and just like being a counselor of sorts to them, letting them know how I personally healed and how I was able to get over this, or, you know, like just really letting them know that they weren't alone. I think that is a very big concept for the world, especially when you're a Christian.
Yep.
And God knows the craziness that's happening today. It's no secret. But I can also tell you, too, that as I've been, and I know I've told you about this before, but as I've been doing the Bible study that I'm doing, and I'll put in the link in the comments, I guess, because I can't remember what it's called. But it's going through the Bible chapter by chapter. And I went through Judges, and I was like, the world has been this screwed up since the day of ages. Like, so not too long ago, Brady and I were driving, I think, to mom and dad's house, and he had made a comment, and I said, and Brady is my husband slash future husband. I just call him my husband. But he made a comment, and I said, man, we still have it so good. We still have it so good considering, and considering of the past and like this world that we live in. And just recently, too, we had talked about how I have come to this realization of Satan not being as big of a fear as we make him out to be, if I say that right. Because, so the reason why is because there was this thing I listened to, and I'm like, man, we really have made Satan to be powerful in many ways.
Well, and he is.
He is.
But he's strong through deception.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. And that's what I want to get to. And so just for me personally, within the last few months, really December and January, I have deepened my relationship with Christ onto a whole nother level. And here we were talking about this the other day, and I was just so like, I'm aware of Satan, but I'm not scared of him like the world makes us believe we should be, because I am a child of God, because God does live in me, that I know Satan can't touch me. And so it's this, I say, man-made fear in many ways, because like if you look at how we portray Satan with the horns and the demon, like we've made that up. And it is a scary figure, but you don't have that fear as much.
But is it wise, and I'm just throwing this out there, but is it wise to not be afraid? Because, like Sun Tzu said, that if you know your enemy and you know yourself, when you go into battle, you will be successful 100% of the time. If you know yourself, but you don't know your enemy, and you go into battle, you are at risk of losing 50% of the time. And if you neither know yourself nor your enemy, you are at risk of losing battle every time. So it's important to know your enemy. It's also important to know yourself. And once you allow God to come in and to introduce you to himself and to what life can mean with him, then you start to learn of yourself. And then as you grow and you realize that these troubles that we face mentally, physically, spiritually, that we see within our society, that's our enemy. Mm-hmm. And if you don't give him the credit that he deserves,
Ruger, come here. Come here.
Then you're at risk of losing. There you go. And, in the one subject that we had touched that one day was fear. Mm-hmm. And how fear can, through the mind, and this is one of the biggest things I've struggled with in my life, was fear. And it started when I was a kid, about 10 years old. And I've told you the story, but we were at my great uncle's putting up hay, and And so the elevation difference was quite a bit between where we lived and where we were at. And I imagine I probably had some health, what's it called when you can't breathe?
Like my problem?
Yeah.
Like anxiety or
Well,
panic attacks or
probably some anxiety. And then what's the physical issue where
asthma?
yeah, there you
Okay,
go. That's it. That's the one.
I've had that too.
Yeah. And so I woke up in the middle of the night, couldn't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to die. But my dad was not the type of person who you could go to. And so I just had to lay there as a 10-year-old kid, not able to breathe, just expecting to die. And that really messed with my head. So I dealt with fear growing up, not just mentally, but fear of my dad, um, fear of doing wrong, all these things. So then you get into adulthood, and I learned to deal with the fear different ways. I lifted weights, became very strong, um, always took care of myself first so that I could feel confident that I was um, meeting my needs first, apart from anybody else.
Well, that's like also the way of the world too. We are
It is.
born to survival of the fittest and take care of ourselves.
Yeah,
and
we're told, to achieve happiness is to feel good. That's it. It's about emotions.
Mhm.
Well, so then for about the last 15 years, the struggle that I had that started that day that I took you to Black Hills,
I remember that.
the struggle really intensified and became almost to the point where I thought I was going nuts. And I thought, nobody else deals with this sort of problem. Nobody else has these irrational fears that just affect you not only mentally and spiritually, but physically. And so that went on for years. And so it was about 3 years ago that I felt like you, the spirit whispers in your ear, and suggested that I read a chapter of scripture every morning before I got up. I thought, well, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, and I told God I'd give him a year. I'd do it for a year.
Yeah.
And
all the more reason
yeah,
for us to do this.
there
Crazy.
You go.
Okay. That's a whole nother story. We'll try to come back to it.
We'll get to that. So I started doing that every morning. I had a Bible app on my phone. So before I would do anything else, I would just bring it up and I would read a chapter. Well, that went on for close to a year. And then my wife and I, of now 40 years, we're having difficulties in our relationship. And so I was approaching God as to what is wrong with her.
So many of us.
Yeah,
we all want to change that person.
So, I mean, I know where I was. I know where I was standing. I know exactly the moment when the Spirit of God said, "You do not have a servant's heart." And that was quite a shock to me because I always had thought of myself as a decent human being, as a Christian, um, and that I always wanted the best for people and I wanted to be kind. But there's a difference between wanting to and being. And so I had that, and then he wasn't done yet. I mean, he then spoke to me and said, and there was a part of my life, a lust, that I had always fought against, but I didn't really want to give it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I know it's wrong, but I fight it. Oh, I try to. Oh, I don't want to do it.
I try so hard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I try so hard, and I'm back to ask forgiveness.
Yeah.
And so he said, and you have not given that to me. You're just hanging on to it. So that morning, he gave me 2 projects. One was to ask how to get a servant's heart, and the other was to ask, how do I give up? this part of my life.
Very interesting that you say that, because something that I personally feel is I have always had that servant's heart. I've always wanted to help people. I have been a worrywart to the extent of, oh my gosh, did you email that person back? Because I cared about them. I wanted them to feel important. So like my mind is always constantly like, I want to serve people. However, when you say that, something I have been working on that I haven't I don't even think talked to you about yet, is like, my biggest thing is I had this servant's heart, but I wasn't living with God in me yet. And I think that has probably been my biggest turnaround between December and January of living with God in me. Because all throughout the years, I gave my life to God. I was baptized when I was 14.
Yeah.
And at that point, I knew who God was. I knew who I was giving my life to. But it's like it's like what you were just saying about how like you need to give that up and you try, but how hard are you really trying?
Right. Yeah.
And so coming to deepen my relationship with God, it was a matter of like allowing him to live in me and actually spending that time to meditate in the morning with him, to meditate with him at night, like to be in the word, and selfishly like making that time non-negotiable, because life happens and we all get busy. And it's like the scripture every morning. I bet that was extremely hard to do, because selfishly, you wanted to sleep in. You wanted to go do, whatever you wanted to do. Go have your coffee.
You want to get up. You want to get going. You want to be about your business.
Yes.
And, the first commandment states that we will love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Well, how many of us do that?
Oh, it's so hard.
I mean, I accepted Christ when I was 28. I'm 67. I'm just starting to come into an understanding of how important relationship is, not just with people, but especially with God. Because, when I did my dad's service, I didn't know what to do, because my dad had a Jekyll and Hyde personality, much like all of us. But he had been a very difficult man to be with, a very difficult man to live with, and had done some things that were not good. And so I was given the job of the service because I was the one who did that God thing. And so I'd been a week working on things, studying and praying and trying to figure out what to say. Where, I said, God, I'm going to have my brothers, sisters, my mom on this side. I'm going to have my dad's sisters and friends and the like on this side. If I speak to this side's going to have a heart attack. If I speak to this side's going to think you're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
So what do I do? And by the morning of the service, I knew I didn't have anything. I mean, I had a dozen pages of handwritten notes, and I had nothing.
That. Yeah.
I was 2 miles from the gravesite when God gave me the scripture. And it's when Christ was in the synagogue and a lawyer was sent in to contest with him and try to trip him up. So the lawyer came in and, of course, we know you're a wonderful person, but what's the greatest command? And Jesus said, to love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, might, and mind. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, what I had never seen or realized was what he said right after that. He said, excuse me, all the law and all the prophets are based on these two. So everything is built off of relationship. God created us for relationship. And then he wants us to love each other because he wants us to experience what relationship can mean. But that has all been destroyed through our unwillingness to be what we were created to be. we're selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he told me, you don't have a servant's heart, boy, that started me asking questions.